the very edge of the blade is kind of like that. And it's pointing slightly upwards. You've got a bevel here, it's flat on the bottom but curved and so forth. And then you'll see this design in this drawing that I'm going to do now. You'll see this in Peter Vido's annex of the side book, which is, if you hone a bit, then that goes like that and it goes around like that. Sorry, if you mow a bit, it dulls it and it goes like that. If you hone a bit, it goes like that. And you mow a bit, hone a bit, mow a bit, hone a bit, mow a bit, hone a bit, and so on. And what's happening is you know, the shape that was originally like that is gradually turning into one that's like that. And it also gets a bit of a secondary bevel underneath as well. Like here, at this point, to hone that bit, it takes almost, you hardly had to remove any metal at all. By the time it's like that, to get, I mean, one thing you have to emphasise to people is you're talking about two different things. You're talking about sharpness, which is the sort of aspiration towards nothingness at the very end, and you're talking about the angle of the bevel. And you can have a wide bevel like that and a narrow one like that. They can both be sharp, and this you can still get that sharp, and it will, you know. And if you did get it sharp, it would resemble something like an axe or a tool that needed a bit more meat on it because it was going into something heavy. But the amount of grinding with your stone to get that sharp is a great deal more than the tiny bit you've got to take off there at that end. So you're gradually getting diminishing returns from your honing, and it's getting more and more rounded like that. And what you have to do is to get it back to this shape, like that. So you've got to remove all that, or at least you've got to, you know, move back from, well, so it's more like that, isn't it? You've got to move back from that to that. And there are two ways of doing it. And one is to abrade all that off, which you can do on a grinding wheel or with a file, or even with, I've seen it done with an angle grinder. In fact, I've done it with an angle grinder. And an angle grinder, one of the soft pads, sanding pads, those flappy sanding pads, you can do a surprisingly good sort of peening job, but you have to be really quick, otherwise you burn the end of the but I've seen it done like that. Of course that is what English blades, that's how, you know, there isn't any peening on an English blade. There is only abrasion. That's the only way you've got of getting it sharp. And so you know, there's again in the side book there's a picture of a couple of guys in the field in the United States with a great big grinding wheel like that, and they're getting rid of that lump. And there's also a Robert Frost poem about how boring it is turning the wheel of the grindstone and how he wants to break it to pieces and things. But this is the other important difference between an English blade and an Austrian blade, which is with the Austrian blade, you can't get in at a sensible angle to remove that, so it's flat enough. You've got to be in at about that angle there, and I mean you can get in like that, but that doesn't give you much play. If you try and do that on a big wheel, like the one in the Robert Frost picture, you just won't get the angle right. Even on a Tormek, until the Tormek's really worn down. Does everybody know what a Tormek is?
No.
A Tormek is a a small Swedish grinding wheel that runs through water, because any grinding wheel you use has got to be running through water.
Okay.
And it won't get in there because the back's in the way. This is curved, and that helps give the blade tension. That means you can't get in there like that, or with the grinding wheel, unless the grinding wheel is very small. But you can do it with those floppy sanding discs. The English blade, on the other hand, has this, because it's stamped and not, or to a great deal, and rather less forged and rather more stamped. It's got this, what I call and this is the same for both the painted blade, either ones which are riveted to a back, and the crown blades. They've all got this, what I call a ha-ha going along here, which is a little ditch, and that means that the back is the same height as the as the blade, and it means you can get in at any angle, however shallow an angle you want, you can get in at it, and that means that you know, a big grinding wheel will grind this stuff away at the correct angle, and it means that also that you'll notice that when English people hone, you know, not people, but if you've got an Austrian blade, you're going like an Austrian blade, you're going like this, and if your stones are peering up there, unless you're actually clattering on that, you've got too wide an angle for most things. That's not the case with this blade. If that's appearing up there, that's fine. That's still it can be appearing up there, and it's still a better angle, which means you can use one of those big cigar stones. And you'll notice when English people smoke, they do much bigger sweeps. I can't even do it. Well, certainly not on, but the sweep when you're honing an English blade is much bigger. And I mean, Martin Kiddlewhite and some other people on Saturday are going to be going through the English blade, and they know much more about it than me. From what I understand, Martin uses a coarse blade, a coarse stone, for effectively doing what peening is, i.e. removing this stuff, and then a finer one for getting the very edge. The only way to use grinding effectively to peen, in inverted commas, on an Austrian blade is to go like, to come in like that. It's better to do it sitting down. It's best of all. Best way is to clamp it on a table like this. Stick a clamp in there, and then you can go with both your hands like that, and that's the safest. So it's got clamps, and then you can get really good pressure with your file like that. But the angle is about like that. That's too steep. You're going to be making a secondary bevel, or else a very you know, it's too steep a bevel. You're coming in like that, and you're going like that, and that is, you know, obviously there's a danger of you cutting yourself. Though, in fact, if you hold the thing like that, it will go like that and does sort of prevent, but of course it can slip like that. You know, I always tell people on the courses that when they're doing this for the first time, do it with gloves and do it with a brand new file, or a very new file, not with an old file, and preferably clamp it to the table. And when people come on courses, I'll ask them what they're mowing, and if they're mowing weeds, basically doing weeds and a bit of grass or something, I'll say just don't bother with peeling. You don't need it. You know, if all you're doing is you know, unless you actually want to get into peeling, if you want to get into peeling, fine, but you don't need to. You can live quite happily. You know, I've got a 30-year-old blade down there, which was brought to me by a bloke who'd been mowing not just weeds but grass round a reservoir in Devon, and he came back because well, I'll show you the blade. It's
What's that?
That's what a 30-year-old blade looks like. And he said, I need a new blade. and and I reckon he was probably using a file, because I mean, nobody had heard of peening in England until 7 years ago or whatever. So, yeah, peening is difficult. For a lot of people, it's just not necessary if they're not doing a lot of grass. All they need to do is learn how to file, and file that bit off there, right? Also, what I say in this is that as your blade becomes tired, if you don't want to peen, or if you want to put off peening, I mean, what I will do is, after about an hour and a half, you can feel the blade's not as, that you're getting diminishing returns from the honing, or after an hour and a half, 2 hours, after 2 hours it's starting to get tired possibly. But I don't want to go back and peen. I have this in my pocket. I come out and do that all the way along the blade, and this all on this side of the blade, sharpen up again, and it's quite radical. It makes a difference. It's not as good as going and backing and peening, but it helps. It gives you another hour of it refreshes the blade quite a lot. So what it does, I suppose, is if your blade's like that, and you come in with this, it will do something like that. And it gets you'd have to do quite a lot of it to get it back to that, but it will at least take that roundedness, that bull nose out of it. But whereas what peening is instead of getting rid of that, you're thumping down here and squidging that so it squidges out back to that shape again. Now there's one other matter to do with that, which is that when if you come in with the file is straight, so whatever bevel you make, however fine you make it, it's going to be straighter than I can draw. Right? Whereas if you peen, if that's what the file is, if you peen, and that goes up there, so that's if you peen, you get a concave surface, so it comes round like that. Okay, more what I call a fox's snout. Now, the thing about the peening profile, which you can't get with the file, is that when you want to sharpen up this file, you've really got to get rid of all that metal each time you sharpen, and in fact you don't do it. So you tend to knock off a bit there and start making a secondary bevel. Whereas when it's concave, you've got much less metal to make. You only need to remove a tiny bit of metal. You've got what's called hollow ground in here, and that means you only have to remove a tiny bit of metal to get the sharpness back again. It's still being compromised each time you do it. You're still, the more you do, the more you take off, the more the more it's gradually going like that. But it's still.
But you've got quite a lot further that you can hone it before you're getting into the same thickness of metal as if you've just filed it.
And that's, people say, why peen? And there are three advantages of peening. Well, one is that you don't waste metal, so your blade lasts 40 years instead of 30 years. The second is that it hardens the metal a bit. But I think the main advantage is that it makes this concave hollow ground in the bevel, and you'll find that some carpenters do that as well. They'll put a little bit of hollow ground in for the same reason.